Just the area alone occupied dozens of acres of land. The palace-like buildings made Rexton and the others gasp in amazement. The cost of this hotel was naturally not comparable. The cost of a night's stay was over 1,000 gold coins, which made Rexton and the others dumbfounded. They only had a few thousand gold coins on them, but this Galaxy Hotel cost over 1,000 gold coins a night. How could they afford it? Lorca, Vivian, and the others also had bitter smiles on their faces. They had known before they came that the price of goods in the Shijiao Empire was higher than that of the Simon Empire, but they had not expected them to be so ridiculously high. The cost of a hotel for a night was actually over 1,000 gold coins. How powerful was Lu's perception? The first thing he noticed was that Rexton and the others did not have much of an expression on their faces. Naturally, he could guess what they were thinking. Thus, he chuckled. I think this place isn't bad. Let's stay here. All the expenses will be on me. Since he treated Rexton and the others as friends, Lu was naturally very generous to them. In any case, he wasn't lacking in money. In the runic space, gold coins were almost piled into a small mountain. Rexton's eyes lit up when he heard this. He chuckled and spoke, but didn't decline. How can I be so shameless? He knew that 13 was not short of money. He was willing to spend 1,000 gold coins just to buy a worthless maid, so he did not plan to be polite. Since his friend was good to him, he would return the favor in the future. His personality was like this. He was free and easy. No, 13, we will pay for this hotel ourselves. Lorca and Vivian looked hesitant when they heard this. Vivian bit her lips and said softly, previously, I have troubled you to help me solve the problem. Now, how can I let you help me pay for the accommodation? Vivian felt helpless about the high accommodation fee, but she did not want to accept Lu's good intentions. After all, Lu had fought against the queen's pursuers time and time again for her sake. Now, he had to pay for their accommodation fee. She felt bad. She didn't want to owe Lu, and she didn't want him to look down on her. You're all my friends. Don't worry about these things. I have a lot of money and nowhere to spend it. Just listen to me. Lu waved his hand, signaling for Vivian and the others to ignore it. In order to make them not mind, Lu had said that he had a lot of money and nowhere to spend it. However, this was not boasting. If Rexton and the others knew that there was a small mountain of gold coins in his runic space, they probably would not be polite with him. Not to mention gold coins, just taking out a random treasure alone would be worth an unknown amount of gold coins. There were even some things that could not be bought with gold coins. Lu was so generous right now. Kamiya, Miss Elizabeth, you are the same. Don't be polite to me. I still have to thank Miss Elizabeth for teaching me about runes. Lu looked at Kamiya and Elizabeth and said softly, there's no need. Elizabeth was also a person who did not lack money. Without thinking, she intended to reject Lu's good intentions. However, before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by Kamiya. All right, I'll listen to you. Kamiya looked at Lu meaningfully. With her intelligence and wisdom, ever since she had found out that the treasury of Berg's residence had been stolen, she immediately thought that it had been taken by this B*****. To kill Berg silently and then steal his treasury, who else would do such a thing besides Lu? That was why Kamiya told Elizabeth not to be polite. As for herself, it was even more impossible for her to be polite to Lu. He was her man. So what if her man was spending money on her? Shouldn't a woman enjoy being treated well by a man? Sister Kamiya, I have money. Elizabeth looked at Kamiya strangely and did not understand. In her opinion, it was unacceptable for her to accept the kindness of others for no reason. After all, she came from the royal family of the Dawn Empire. The arrogance of the royal family made it impossible for her to accept this. Kamiya smiled and said, this guy has money. Why should we be polite to him? Just listen to me. Moreover, you have been teaching him. It is only right for him to do so. All right. Since Kamiya said so, Elizabeth could only nod and agree. After thinking about it, it made sense. It was only right for Lu to give her this amount of money. These past few days, Elizabeth had taught him a lot of knowledge about runes, causing his level to soar. What made her speechless was that Lu's basic level was so terrible. Many things that she said were very common, but Lu seemed to be hearing them for the first time, so she had to patiently explain things from the beginning. At the same time, she constantly complained that Lu's teacher was irresponsible. He had only taught Lu how to condense runes and nothing else. At the very least, he had to teach him some basic knowledge. Lu did not know anything. The other day, she had said that his basic level was equivalent to her 5-year-old level. Later, she realized that she had completely overestimated him. Her 1-year-old foundation was even stronger than Lu's, let alone her 5-year-old. Once a member of the royal family of the Dan Empire was born, they would be baptized by a rune master and begin to learn rune knowledge from a young age. This world was different from Lu's world. The people of the rune world had a much stronger constitution. They were born with wisdom and could speak within a month. Within 3 months, they could learn to walk and they could move freely within half a year. That was why Elizabeth knew that Lu's knowledge of runes was not even as basic as when she was 1 year old. If it was not for Lu's good comprehension ability, Elizabeth would have exploded on the spot. This was too difficult to teach. Over the past few days, Lu had understood a lot about runes. He did not dare to say that he had made a qualitative leap, but he was much better than before. Early the next morning, Lu, Kamiya, and the others had a sumptuous breakfast in the Galaxy Hotel. The Galaxy Hotel was indeed a well-known hotel in the Shijiao Empire. There were over 100 different dishes for breakfast. They tasted delicious, and the design was exquisite. They could fully satisfy the tastes of tourists from different regions. Gathering the ingredients was very demanding. They were all fresh ingredients from the 9 great empires. Some travelers found that the taste was exactly the same as their hometown, or even better. After eating this sumptuous breakfast, Lu felt that the thousands of gold coins he had spent were worth it. They had also enjoyed a sumptuous dinner last night, which was even more delicious than the breakfast this morning. There were only 8 of them, but the hotel had already served them over 100 dishes. Lu had never even seen some of the dishes before, and the ingredients had come from the battlefield of the heavens. Lu almost swallowed his tongue. After eating, there were even special waitresses who would dress and bathe beside him. However, because of Claire's presence, Lu had no choice but to decline these runes. After eating breakfast, Lu and his group arrived at the Rune Academy in an imposing manner. After seeing the Rune Academy, Lu immediately felt a wave of astonishment. The Rune Academy in front of him was not quite what he had imagined. In Lu's opinion, the Rune Academy, which was a sacred place for rune masters, should be very grand and magnanimous. However, the Rune Academy in front of him appeared very ordinary and simple. The buildings outside the gate all carried traces of aging. Did you not expect the Rune Academy to be like this? The reason Kamiya had loved runes was that she could completely sense the change in Lu's mood from such a close distance. Moreover, she had been paying attention to him at all times. Lu nodded and said softly, "Not at all. This has something to do with the principal who founded the Rune Academy." Back then, the principal's philosophy was to let all the students of the 9 great empires study runes properly, and not to covet the reputation of the Rune Academy. The purpose of the Rune Academy is to teach well, and not to focus on external things. Therefore, the Rune Academy has always maintained such a simple and unadorned appearance. But even so, the rune masters of the 9 great empires have never wavered in their position in their hearts. Kamiya explained softly, "Some things never need superficial appearances. The history of the Rune Academy itself is the strongest proof." Lu nodded. He agreed with Kamiya's words. As for the others, they did not have any reaction. After all, they were natives of this world. They had long heard of the matter regarding the Rune Academy, so they did not feel surprised. At this moment, a long queue had already formed outside. These people were all students who had come to participate in the assessment, and all of them had nervous expressions on their faces. "I don't know if I can pass the first test of my talent." "How many runes have you condensed? What's the level of the strongest rune?" "I have only condensed 8 runes, and the highest one is only orange runes." "Damn, you actually dared to participate in the Rune Academy's assessment?" "I'm just thinking of giving it a try. What if I pass? Didn't a famous person say that dreams must come true? What if it comes true?" Whispers could be heard from the crowd from time to time. The Rune Academy's assessment was divided into 2 parts, the talent test and the divine monument test. As the name implied, the talent test was to test a person's talent. And the divine monument test was much more mysterious. Everyone who participated in the test would come before these divine monuments. Only those with great fortune and great wisdom could light the divine monument. In other words, the talent test was to see whether a person had the possibility of becoming a powerful rune master, and the divine monument could basically determine that person's future. For thousands of years, the rune masters who were able to light up all the divine monuments had been all the most powerful rune masters in the rune world, becoming the 9-star rune masters. Elizabeth had already mentioned this to Lu on the way, so he wasn't surprised. They started to join the queue. The talent test was very fast. Although Lu didn't know what method to use, he could see that the people who went to take the test would be able to return before long. Those who had a happy smile on their faces passed the test and could continue to take the next round of the Divine Monument test. Those who had sad faces and ugly expressions naturally did not pass the test. Seeing the students who had not passed the test looking like they were in a daze, the remaining students who had not taken the test immediately became nervous. The originally noisy group became much quieter. The crowd continued to move forward, and slowly, it was Lu's turn. He followed a teacher and came to a stone house. Inside was an old man wearing a long black robe. It looked like he was a teacher from the Rune Academy who was in charge of this test. The old man held a transparent crystal ball in his hand. When he saw Lu enter, he coldly said, "Pick up this crystal ball, close your eyes, and hold it tightly for 10 breaths." Although he didn't quite understand the intention of doing this, Lu didn't dare to say anything. He stepped forward and took the crystal ball from the old man's hand, tightly holding it. The crystal ball was bone-piercing cold as if it was a lump of ice. However, Lu didn't care too much. He closed his eyes and began to ease his breathing. This crystal ball had a very common name, Spirit Testing Pearl. Spirit Testing Pearl could test a person's talent and display the corresponding color. This was similar to the pronunciation of runes. A person's talent could also be divided into 7 levels: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple. In order to pass the test, a student's talent had to reach the green level. This was also one of the reasons why the students of the Rune Academy were all elites. Just based on talent alone, they had already selected a large number of people. As for the academies of other empires, the requirements were not so strict. As long as one had talent in cultivation, they would be able to enter and study. Soon, Lu, who had his eyes closed, felt the spirit testing pearl in his hand become warm. It was no longer as cold and bone-piercing as before. At the same time, the spirit testing pearl emitted a faint green light. The serious-looking old man did not even lift his eyelids. Green low-grade talent, barely, you. But before he could finish his words, the spirit measuring pearl underwent a change. From light green to dark green. The old man frowned. This was the first time he had seen such a situation. He was a senior teacher in the academy, and at the same time, he was a 7-star advanced rune master. A high-grade rune master like him couldn't wait to cultivate in seclusion all the time to raise his rune power. But, under the rules of the academy, he was in charge of assessing the students, and he was somewhat unwilling to do so. In the past half a day, he had seen a large number of students with mediocre talent, which made him even more impatient. He couldn't help but grumble in his heart. Why is it that the number of students who have come to take the examination is getting worse with each passing year? Some students who didn't even have the talent to cultivate had dared to take the examination. He was so angry that he nearly summoned his own runes to smack these people to death. Therefore, under such circumstances, the old man's state of mind was already very bad. He had just seen Lu's spirit testing pearl emit a light green color. Another student with average talent. He hadn't expected the spirit testing pearl to turn dark green. This was the first time he had seen such a thing happen. The result of this test was very accurate. Whatever talent was tested would be of the same color. It was absolutely impossible for it to emit any changes. But now, there had been a change, which shocked the old man. What happened next made the old man widen his eyes and stand up abruptly. With his eyes closed, Lu had no idea what was happening outside. This stone house could block the perception of spiritual power. His spiritual power could not be tested in this house. Therefore, he did not know about the changes of the spirit testing pearl and the old man's reaction. At this moment, the spirit testing pearl turned green, emitting a green light. But soon, it turned from green to blue. Under the blue light, the entire stone house seemed to have a layer of blue water flowing. This blue talent, the old man's eyes flickered with shock, and he couldn't help but open his mouth. His voice was trembling. Under his gaze, the spirit testing pearl in Lu's hand had actually changed from a light green color to a blue color. There was only one meaning for the spirit testing pearl to emit a blue light, and that was that the youth who was testing it was a peerless genius. Even Lu himself had only recently tested his blue talent, but just the blue talent alone was enough to make him stand out among most of the students. This youth actually had a blue talent. This was extremely rare. In the past few decades, only a few students had a blue talent. The most recent one had been called Ike. She was a girl from the Frost Empire. Her looks were outstanding and she seemed to have even ranked first on the genius rankings. It seemed that this youth was yet another monster. Who knew if he was more of a monster than that girl called Ike? This wasn't the end. Just as the old man calmed down from his shock, the spirit-testing pearl in Lu's hand changed once again. It turned from blue to purple. FCK. The eyes of the serious-looking old man almost popped out. Purple talent. Oh my god, I'm afraid I'm dreaming. The old man couldn't believe what he was seeing. The old man stared at Lu and slapped himself. The pain on his face made him realize that everything before him was real and not a dream. In an instant, the old man's body trembled, and his heart surged with excitement. He clenched his fists tightly, and veins popped out on his arms. He had not been this excited in decades. A layer of tears unconsciously appeared at the corner of his eyes, and he shouted excitedly, "It's been thousands of years, and the Rune Academy has finally produced someone like you." The old man clapped his hands with an excited expression. He looked like a child. The Rune Academy had been established for thousands of years. During those years, only one person had possessed purple innate talent. This person was the founder of the Rune Academy, the first principal, the Starry Sky Rune King. The Starry Sky Rune King was known as the most powerful Rune King since ancient times. There were even people who claimed that the Starry Sky Rune King was comparable to the 12 sages of the human race. There were even people who directly listed the Starry Sky Rune King as the 13th sage of the human race. This was not only because he was extremely powerful, but he had also established the Rune Academy. More importantly, after the 12 sages of the human race passed away, creatures from space invaded the Rune world on a large scale. Without the 12 sages, the Rune masters of the Rune world could not withstand it. At this time, the Starry Sky Rune King stepped forward. On the heavenly battlefield, he killed 18 experts, thoroughly intimidating the creatures from outer space. With his strength alone, he blocked the invasion from outer space into the Rune world. With this battle record, no one could doubt the strength of the Starry Sky Rune King. Therefore, there was no doubt about the honor of the 13 sages, the strongest symbol king since ancient times. The talent of the 12 sages of the human race could no longer be investigated. After all, they had been the ones who had created the civilization of the Rune world, and they had also been the most powerful human experts. However, the talent of the Starry Sky Rune King was known by everyone in the world. His talent was the purple talent. For thousands of years, only the Starry Sky Rune King had the purple talent. And now, the old man could see the appearance of the purple talent once again. How could he not be excited? He was so excited that he danced around like a crazy child. Especially in these past few years, the Rune world's invasion of outer space had begun to show signs of becoming unstoppable. Once this youth matured, he would definitely become another powerful runic king. At that time, he would definitely be able to reverse the situation on the heavenly battlefield. However, Lu, who caused all of this, did not notice it at all. He was only silently sensing the changes in the spirit-testing pearl. The spirit-testing pearl was getting hotter and hotter, and now it was incomparably hot, extremely hot to the touch. Lu's face also showed a painful expression, and he hesitated whether or not to throw away the crystal ball. The time taken for 10 breaths was soon up. Lu finally couldn't take it anymore and suddenly opened his eyes. He wanted to throw away the boiling spirit-testing pearl. However, at that moment, the purple spirit-testing pearl changed again. Golden light shone out from it as if the sun had just risen. The entire stone house was shining with golden light as if it was made of gold. The old man's excited expression immediately froze, as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes were filled with shock. What the hell was this? How could the pearl shoot out golden light? The talent acknowledged by the Rune world was only at 7 levels. It had 7 colors, but there was no gold in it. He had never seen an ancient book that recorded the existence of a golden talent in the Rune world. The old man was stunned. The purple talent had almost made him kneel. Now, a golden talent? However, he was more nervous than excited. No one knew what the golden talent represented. Even the Starry Sky Rune King's talent was purple. What if this golden talent couldn't be cultivated at all? Or what if it could surpass the purple talent and be comparable to a monster? Teacher, Lu looked at the golden light emitting from the spirit-testing pearl in astonishment. His talent was actually a golden talent? He had never heard of it before. Elizabeth had told him that there were only 7 kinds of talent, the highest being the purple talent. However, Elizabeth had also said that it was impossible for a purple talent to appear. In the past thousands of years, only one person had a purple talent. At that time, Lu was still quite unconvinced. He had the system, so he might really be able to detect a purple talent. He did not expect it to be a gold talent. Could it be because of the time and fate runes in his mind? These 2 powerful runes also displayed a unique golden color. But could talent be the same as runes? Thus, Lu could only ask the old man for help. The old man looked at Lu with a complicated expression. He had many thoughts running through his mind. How the hell would I know what's going on? I want to know too. Also, can you give me back my purple talent? That's a talent that only the Starry Sky Rune King has. The current situation had already exceeded his imagination and understanding. The old man took a deep breath and calmed his heart. He slowly said, "Your situation is a little special. How about this, you and I will go meet someone." The old man knew that he could not explain the situation in front of him. Now, he could only take the young man to ask the principal. The old man did not wait for Lu to agree and hurriedly took him out of the stone house. When the long line of people in the stone house saw the old man and Lu coming out, they were in an uproar. What the hell? Why did the teacher in charge of the test come out? Look, the young man who went in to test just now is actually following behind the test teacher. What's going on? From the looks of it, could it be that this young man's talent is too good and alarmed this teacher, so he's taking him directly into the school? That's impossible. Look at the expression on the test teacher's face. One look and you can tell that something is wrong. I reckon that this young man has done something to anger the teacher, and now he wants to take him to be punished. No, I just want to know, with the test teacher gone, what are we going to do? Are we going to take the test or not? At this moment, the old man was not in the mood to continue the test. He glared at the noisy crowd and shouted, "Later, there will be someone else to take the test for you. Don't make any noise again, or else get lost." Hearing this, the crowd that was originally in a heated discussion instantly quieted down. Young master, young master. When Claire heard the person next to her say that her young master might have offended the teacher of the test, she immediately became worried. She did not care about what the old man had said and directly shouted at Lu. When Lu saw this, he cupped his hands towards the old man and said, "Teacher, those are my maids and friends. Can I inform them before setting off with you?" The old man glanced at Lu. Although he was a little impatient, he didn't stop him. "Hurry up." Lu walked in the direction of Kamiya and the others. Seeing him walking over, Kamiya and the others were nervous. They asked anxiously, "What happened? Are you okay, 13? Did you really offend the test teacher?" Everyone was talking at once. Lu smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just that there's something wrong with my test. The teacher wants to take me to see someone." At the same time, he patted Claire's little head to calm her uneasy emotions. "Young master is fine. You wait here. Please take care of Claire for me, I'll be right back." After saying this, Lu returned to the old man's side. The old man didn't waste too much time. Instead, he summoned a green flying rune. The flying rune was like 2 wings. It wrapped around the old man and Lu's bodies and directly took them into the Rune Academy. The old man's flying rune was extraordinary. Not only was it extremely fast, but it didn't make him feel uncomfortable at all. This was because the airflow generated by the high-speed flight was blocked by a layer of blue light. Lu, who was in midair, was very excited. He only needed to use his will to control the direction. He followed behind the old man and quickly flew into the Rune Academy. At the same time, he thought to himself, "Why didn't I think of flying runes? If I had condensed flying runes earlier, I would have saved a lot of trouble. Moreover, this journey would have been much easier." Beneath his feet was a secluded manor and ancient castle. It occupied an extremely large area, so he assumed should be the Rune Academy. The surroundings were covered with rolling mountains and lush forests. The environment was very quiet. Looking down from the sky, one could see the sounds of many animals living in the forest. It made Lu feel as if he had come to Hogwarts School of Magic in a Harry Potter novel. However, he did not use a magic broom to fly. Instead, he used flying runes. It was much cooler. Soon, Lu and the old man arrived at a castle. The castle was extremely well guarded, and rune masters in long robes were guarding outside the door. Seeing the old man in a hurry, the rune master who was guarding the door greeted him respectfully and let the old man and Lu pass freely. Inside the castle, sunlight came in from the colorful glass on the dome, sprinkling mottled patterns on the ground. A spiral staircase connected the 3 floors. In the spacious hall, there were some human-shaped stone sculptures. Below them, there were some words engraved. It seemed that they were people from the past generations of the Rune Academy. In the hall, there were some rune teachers who looked to be around the same age as the old man. They wore the long robes of the rune school and held books or teaching plans in their hands. These were the teachers of the Rune Academy. This castle was the academic building of the Rune Academy. The principal's office was on the top floor of the building. The old man led Lu up the stairs and came to the door. Knock, knock, knock. The old man knocked on the door. Please come in, a dignified voice came from the office. The old man pushed the door open and walked in with Lu. In the office, the principal was wearing a blue robe and a pointed hat. He was sitting on a chair and working at his desk. The principal was older than the old man. His hair and beard were all smoothed and there were no wrinkles on his face. When he saw Lu and the old man, he looked up with a strange expression. Soros, aren't you in charge of testing the new students? The old man named Soros said, Yes, Principal Frank, but there's an even more important matter now. Oh, Frank put down the pen in his hand and asked curiously, What is it? Him. Soros pointed at Lu. Frank's snow-white eyebrows furrowed, and his eyes were somewhat puzzled. This youth should be an examinee who came to take the test this time, right? What's wrong? Lu wasn't wearing the uniform of the Rune Academy. Now that he was able to follow Soros, who was in charge of the test, to his office, it wasn't hard to guess that this youth was one of the students who had participated in the test. Soros took a deep breath, his face still showing shock. Principal, during the test, this youth's spirit testing pearl displayed a light green color at the beginning, but in the end, it changed to cyan, blue, and then purple. Before he could finish his words, Frank suddenly stood up and cried out in shock, What, purple talent? Soros actually said that this youth's spirit testing pearl had actually tested out a purple talent? Frank had lived for hundreds of years and had seen so many things. His figure had appeared in every part of the rune world. He had also met with ferocious-looking foreign creatures that had completely different shapes from them on the heavenly battlefields. After experiencing life and death, Frank's heart had become as calm as an ancient well after hundreds of years. There was no longer anything that could cause waves in his heart. However, at this moment, his heart was like an undulating wave. The words, purple talent, were like a bomb that had directly blown him up from his chair. For thousands of years, only one person in the rune world had a purple talent. That was the founder of the Rune Academy, the Starry Sky Rune King. Did this youth actually have a purple talent? Frank's eyes were filled with shock and doubt as he looked at Soros and Lu. Soros seemed to have already anticipated Frank's reaction. Seeing Frank's gaze, he continued, Yes, it is a purple talent, but... At this point, he did not know what to say. Those who had not seen it with their own eyes might not believe what he said. But what? Frank frowned. Hurry up and say it, don't keep me in suspense. Soros sighed and continued, but the spirit measuring pearl quickly turned golden, emitting a dazzling golden light. Principal, do you know who has had a golden talent for thousands of years? Frank was stunned. Golden talent? He had lived for hundreds of years and had never heard of a golden talent. However, Soros did not look like he was lying. Principal, if you don't believe me, you can ask this young man to test it again. Soros saw Frank's suspicious expression and suggested having Lu take the test again. After all, he had the spirit testing pearl with him. Alright, then test it again. Frank nodded. Could it be that he really had a golden talent? Alright. Lu nodded and held the spirit testing pearl in the same way as before. Once again, the spirit testing pearl emitted a golden light. Under the golden light, Frank's face was filled with shock and disbelief. His eyes were wide open. Soros was a little better. After all, he had already seen it once, so he was not as shocked. He did not understand why this would happen but hoped the principal might know. After all, Principal Frank had lived for hundreds of years and had seen a lot of things. The world was not something he could compare to. Soros estimated that there were only 4 or 5 people in the entire rune world who could answer this question. Other than the mysterious 3 great rune kings. there was Principal Frank and the sauna witch who was already proficient in divination. He looked at Lou in a daze. He was so shocked that he could not speak. Frank, who had lived for hundreds of years, immediately cursed in his heart. He really did have a golden talent. Moreover, this formation was even more terrifying than the purple talent. When the purple talent appeared, there would be a dense purple mist surrounding it. However, this golden talent was like a sun, directly shining tens of thousands of rays of golden light. If they were ordinary people, their eyes would probably be blinded by the light. "Principal, what do you think is going on?" Soros asked with anticipation. Lou also looked at Principal Frank curiously. Frank was stunned. "How do I know what is going on? I have lived for hundreds of years, and this is the first time I have seen such a thing happen." However, Frank could only say this in his heart. He was the principal of the Rune Academy, an 8-star rune master who had lived for hundreds of years. He could only cough dryly. Ahem, this student's situation is a little special. Although the golden talent has never been recorded in the history books, it's not like there hasn't been anyone with golden talent in the past 1,000 years. Soros's expression was one of joy. As expected, Principal Frank knew. Lou also listened very seriously. This is a mutated talent. It's extremely rare. Its rarity is comparable to a purple talent. Golden talent can only exist in a person's youth. Once one passes the youth stage, it will cease to exist. Golden talent is also very defining. In the past thousands of years, there have only been a few rune masters with golden talent. It's very strange. Some are extremely powerful, and some are unable to even condense runes. Frank continued to spout nonsense, so golden talent cannot be defined at all. Whether it's a high-grade talent or not is still an unsolved mystery. However, this student can pass the Academy's talent test. After passing the subsequent tests, he can go to the Rune Academy to study and see how his future cultivation speed will be. After Soros heard it, his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of disappointment. So that's how it is. Golden talent was a mutated talent. Whether it was a powerful talent or not, could not be determined. In Soros's opinion, no matter how powerful a golden talent was, it could not be compared to a purple talent. After all, for thousands of years, only the Starry Sky Rune King had a purple talent. Previously, he had seen Lou turn from a purple talent to a golden talent. For a moment, he sighed helplessly and said to Lou, "You should wait for the talent test to end first. Then, you can go and participate in the Divine Monument test together." "All right." Lou lightly nodded. Although he was somewhat stunned in his heart, his golden talent actually belonged to a mutated talent, and it couldn't even be defined? From what the old principal had said, this talent could be very strong or very weak. Unlike other talents, it could completely predict a rune master's future achievements. For example, a blue talent could become an advanced rune master or even a rune king in the future. If he had a green talent, he would only be able to become an intermediate rune master. If he was lucky, he would barely be able to become an advanced rune master. However, he would only be at the bottom. He would only be able to become a low-level rune master with a worse talent. With such talent, he wouldn't even pass the test. The Rune Academy didn't need such students at all. However, Lou quickly regained his vigor. He estimated that his golden talent must be related to the golden runes in his mind. Moreover, with the system in hand, he didn't dare to say that he would be able to dominate the world and become the #1 rune master in Starry Sky in the future. But at least he could step into the peak of this world. By the time Lou and Soros returned to where the Academy tested their talent, Rexton and the others had already finished testing their talent. They were gathered under the willow tree, anxiously waiting for Lou. Lou and Soros descended from the sky. Soros said in a deep voice, "You can wait here. After all the student talent tests, the Academy will arrange the next round of tests. You can just follow on with that test." After saying that, he gave Lou a few heavy glances before turning around to leave. Lou could still hear Soros sighing. "Lou, young master." Kamiya and the others beside the willow tree quickly surrounded Lou when they saw him. "How are you guys? The test is over, right?" Lou smiled and asked softly. "The test is over. I didn't expect us to be so lucky to pass the test," Rexton said excitedly. This time, it was Lou's turn to be a little surprised. They didn't think that they would all pass the test. It seemed that their talent wasn't bad. "Lorca and I have a light green talent, while Vivian has a green talent," Rexton said. They also didn't think that their talent had reached the pass mark. Moreover, among the three of them, Vivian actually had the best talent. At first, they had all thought that they had no hope. After all, they hadn't condensed many runes before, and the quality wasn't that great. They didn't have much confidence in this test. They hadn't expected to actually touch the edge of the qualifying line. Lu was also happy for them. If they could pass the talent test, they could continue on to the next round. As long as they could light up the 30 divine monuments, they could stay in the Rune Academy to study. Rexton and the others were his few friends in the Rune world. He did not wish to be separated from them. It would be best if they could stay in the Rune Academy together. What about you two? Lu looked at Camilla and Elizabeth. He did not understand Elizabeth, but her strength was formidable. It could be said that she was the strongest person he had met, other than Anthony, since he had transmigrated. He believed that her talent was definitely not bad. As for Camilla being the #1 genius of the Simon Empire, Lu had long heard of her. Camilla proudly raised her swan-like neck and said proudly, "Elizabeth and I both have blue talent. How amazing is that?" Blue talent was currently publicly acknowledged as the top talent. Amazing. How could Lu not understand the thoughts of these women? Although it was within his expectations, Lu still revealed a surprised expression and gave a thumbs up. That's right. Camilla was very satisfied with his reaction, and then continued, "Oh right. What kind of talent are you? Where did the test teacher take you?" "My talent is a little strange. The test teacher took me to see the old principal of the Rune Academy. The principal said that I have a mutated talent. As for the condition of my talent, I can't be sure, but he allowed me to pass the test," Lu said softly. Mutated talent? Everyone was stunned for a moment and repeated the same sentence in unison. Especially Camilla and Elizabeth. They had never heard of any mutated talent. Elizabeth's eyes were filled with doubt. "I have never heard of mutated talent, not even in the family's collection of books. I didn't expect you to have mutated talent." Camilla was also extremely surprised and sighed. "No matter what talent it is, as long as you can pass the test, it's a good talent." Rexton and the others' mouths were slightly agape. Mutated talent? Although they did not know what it was, it sounded very powerful. No wonder Lu was so powerful. It turned out that he had mutated talent. Vivian's eyes were also filled with surprise, but there was also a hint of sadness in them. 13 had extremely powerful combat strength, a perfect body and appearance, he treated people well, and now he had mutated talent. He really wasn't from the same world as her. She wouldn't have the chance to get close to the 13th young master's heart. After chatting for a while, a relatively young test teacher walked out and said in a deep voice, "Today's test ends here. We'll continue tomorrow. The test will last for a total of 7 days. After 7 days, the students who pass the test will come here again." After saying this, he ignored the examinees' reactions and directly left. There were at least 100,000 students who had come to participate in the test. Of course, it was impossible for them to finish the test in 1 day. They had to split the test into 7 days. Those students who had yet to take the test complained one after another. After waiting for a day, their legs were about to break. Now, they actually wouldn't take the test and had to wait for tomorrow. Of course, they felt extremely unhappy in their hearts, however, they could only suppress it. They didn't have the courage to contradict the teachers of the Rune Academy. As for those examinees who had passed the test, their faces were filled with relief and joy. They happily chatted as they left the academy. Looking at the students who hadn't passed the test, their faces were ashen. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Some of them didn't even leave. They sat dejectedly on the ground, unwilling to accept reality. After all, entering the Rune Academy had always been their dream. Now that they were unable to pass the test, it was like a huge hammer smashing fiercely into their hearts. As for Lu and the others, they had already passed the test, so they did not stay in the academy any longer. A faint smile hung on their faces as they returned to the Galaxy Hotel. There was no need for them to go to the Rune Academy for the remaining few days. They could enjoy themselves. After 7 days, they would go to the Rune Academy to participate in the next round of the test. During these few days, under the leadership of Elizabeth, Lu and the rest had a good tour of the capital of the Shijiao Empire. 7 days later, Lu and the rest returned to the Rune Academy. The examinees who had passed the test like them had also rushed back. After looking around, there were less than 3,000 people. Out of the hundreds of thousands of examinees, only 3,000 were left. This was an extremely exaggerated elimination rate. This was not the final result. They still had to participate in the Divine Monument test. It was estimated that many more people would be eliminated. At that time, it would already be considered pretty good if more than 1,000 people remained. Soros wore a long robe as he stood in front of the stone house. His face was solemn. Congratulations on passing the first round of the test. This proves that you all have the qualifications to enter the next round of the test. However, whether or not you can stay in the academy to study still depends on whether or not you can pass the second round of the test. The second round of the test will light up the Divine Monuments. Later on, I will take you all to the Divine Monument Mausoleum. There are a total of 108 Divine Monuments in the mausoleum, and they are distributed in various places. Use your thoughts to sense them, and if you succeed in sensing them, you will be able to make them shine. As long as you can light up 30 stone monuments, you will be able to enter the Rune Academy. Do you all understand? Soros coldly looked at the examinees in front of him. Understood. Everyone replied in unison. Their faces were nervous. Some of them were so nervous that their faces turned pale. Although they had passed the first round of the test, they did not feel very happy. After all, the first round only screened everyone's talent. What truly determined whether they could stay in the Rune Academy or not was whether they could light up the 30 Divine Monuments. This had nothing to do with talent. It could only be said that it had to do with a person's luck, wisdom, and other mysterious factors. Everyone could communicate with the Divine Monuments in a different way, so there wasn't a specific method. They could only use their minds to sense the location of the Divine Monument's light. Rexton and the others were also nervous. They were actually very satisfied with the results. They had thought that they wouldn't even pass the first round of the talent test. Now, they were actually able to reach the second round of the test. Although such results weren't considered much in the Rune Academy, in the rune schools of the other empires, it was an extremely great matter. As long as these people knew that they had passed the Rune Academy's innate talent test and they had even participated in the test to light up the Divine Monuments, no matter what the results were, these schools would treat them like treasures and welcome them with open arms. Why? Of course, it was because the Rune Academy had already helped them assess the talent of these examinees. Those who could pass the first round of the talent test would at least have a light green talent. Although they were at the bottom of the Rune Academy, this didn't mean that their light green talent was very bad. On the contrary, it was already very good. At least within the vast rune world, they had obtained a light green talent from the 9 great empires. There weren't many people with light green talent. Secondly, being able to enter the Divine Monument Mausoleum would also allow one to gain something. It could cleanse one's soul and strengthen one's mental strength. In short, there were all sorts of benefits. That was why these people who had been eliminated by the Shi Xihao Empire's Rune Academy were treated like treasures by the other schools. That was why Rexton and the others were in a good mood. Regardless of whether they could enter the Rune Academy or not, it would be good to experience it. The 108 Divine Monuments in the Divine Monument Mausoleum had been built by the 12 sages of the human race. It was said that they contained the sages' understanding of runes. This trip had been worth it. Even if they did not pass the test, after they left, there would still be other schools fighting for their admission. This was not the only rune school in the Shijiao Empire. To be precise, this Rune Academy should be called the First Rune Academy, or the Starry Sky Academy. This was because the creator of this academy was the Starry Sky Rune King from thousands of years ago. In the south of the Rune Academy, there was a wide and clear river with a wooden bridge across it. After crossing this wooden bridge, one could see a large and lush garden. In the depths of the garden, there were a few green mountains that rose and fell continuously. The Divine Monument Garden was located in those green mountains and was where the mausoleum was situated. Under Soros's lead, the examinees walked across the wooden bridge. They looked at the green mountains with excitement, their faces filled with yearning. Lu wasn't as excited as the examinees, although he was a little curious as to what this divine monument was that could make these people so excited. Did it really contain the understanding and comprehension of runes of the 12 sages of the human race? Soon, under Soros's lead, they crossed the wide wooden bridge on the river and arrived at the green garden outside the Divine Monument Garden. Of course, they didn't stop here. Instead, they directly passed the main road that was only seen by the ancient green trees and continued to walk towards the continuous green mountains. On both sides of the road stood stone statues. These were all outstanding figures of the Rune Academy over the past thousands of years. There were principals, teachers, and students. Although some students had left the Rune Academy, Their cultivation had never fallen behind. On the contrary, they had become powerful rune masters and had achieved great accomplishments. This was why they were qualified to be carved into statues and placed here. The towering ancient trees were lush and verdant, blocking out the sunlight and scattering down large patches of shadows. The environment was extremely tranquil and serene. The deeper one went, the quieter it became. No one dared to open their mouths to speak, and they held their breaths as they walked forward. The examinees raised their heads and looked at the scenery around them. They looked at the green mountains that were getting closer, but they still could not see them clearly. They became more and more nervous. Soros stopped. At the end of the dark road was a stone door. Beside it were a few rune masters in long robes guarding the place. Soros stopped in front of the stone door among the examinees. They also stopped. After Soros talked to the rune masters guarding the door, they walked to the side. They summoned green runes. These were rock runes, and they could control rocks. Under the light of the rock runes, the stone door slowly opened. The examinees felt a slight tremor coming from the ground, and they couldn't help but be surprised. They thought to themselves, how heavy was this seemingly unremarkable stone door? It actually made the ground shake. How powerful were these few rune masters who were controlling the rock runes? Although the ability of runes was very powerful, it was not omnipotent. The strength that any rune master could display when using runes, other than the level of the runes themselves, was also related to the rune master's own strength, mental strength, physical quality, and so on. Immediately after, there was a suitable low sound. The heavy stone door stopped moving, and the appearance of the green mountains finally appeared in everyone's field of vision. The divine monument garden was reflected in Lu's eyes. Although it was called a garden, it actually looked more like a tomb. The divine monument garden really looked like a tomb, but it was incomparably grand. It was square and was surrounded by countless green pines and cypresses. Because of the cover of these trees, the examinees could not see the legendary stone monuments. However, they knew that the divine monuments were in the forest within the Green Mountains. For a moment, everyone's faces revealed a devout expression. Go in. After Soros said that, the examinees entered the garden one by one. Clear tremors could be heard from the ground once again. Some people turned their heads to look, only to see the stone doors slowly closing. With a muffled sound, the divine monument garden was once again isolated from the outside world. Thousands of young examinees looked at the divine monument garden in front of them. Their expressions were all different. Some were very nervous, some were looking forward to it, some were very silent, and some could no longer suppress the excitement in their bodies. They wanted to immediately try to communicate with the divine monument. However, most of them had really big eyes. Only when they entered the garden did they realize how big it was inside. From the outside, they could only see a corner of the garden. Moreover, the forest had blocked too much of the scenery. At this moment, a few men wearing simple and unadorned long robes appeared in front of them. Their expressions were indifferent. Their voices were also very calm, and their speaking speed was very slow. It was as if they rarely spoke. Kamiya said, "These people are the legendary monument slaves." Monument slaves? Lu asked in surprise. Yes. Elizabeth, who was at the side, nodded. Looking at Lu's surprised expression, she knew that he definitely did not know what a monument slave was. But with his lousy foundation, he really could not be ridiculed. She was already used to explaining all sorts of common sense to Lu. She explained, these monument slaves are actually the same as us. It's just that they are former examinees. Their obsession is so strong that they swore that they must light up all 108 stels, or else they will never leave the divine monument garden. Lu was somewhat surprised. He thought to himself that spending his long life in the divine monument garden would be too lonely. If he continued to fantasize about those men in long robes, his gaze would naturally be filled with pity. Elizabeth looked at the expression on his face. She said with slight ridicule, "They are willing to devote their lives to the divine monument garden. They don't need your sympathy. Moreover, who knows how many rune masters in the rune world want to come to the divine monument garden to comprehend these divine monuments. Who knows, they might be able to comprehend the runic profoundness of the ancient human ancestors from them and become an incomparably powerful rune master from then on." Lu shook his head, still unable to understand the thoughts of these monument slaves. In fact, the monument slaves had already very clearly explained the way the rune world viewed these people. The monument slaves were also the slaves of the divine monuments. The slaves didn't have freedom, didn't have rights, didn't have anything. They were just a shell, a walking corpse. As a modern person, Lu naturally couldn't understand the behavior of these monument slaves. After all, life was limited. All human activities were to allow one to enjoy life. In order to comprehend these divine monuments, these people were actually willing to spend their entire lives trying. This kind of behavior was something he couldn't understand. Could it be that after mastering runes, one would have some money and enjoy life comfortably? What did these people obtain from the pictures? Moreover, comprehending the divine monuments was completely dependent on a person's wisdom, luck, and so on. If one could not comprehend it, then that would be it. Even if one spent their entire life here, would it really be useful? We only have a month. In a month's time, the stone doors of the divine monument garden will open. We have to leave, or else we will be trapped within this garden. Elizabeth reminded him lightly. After she finished speaking, the place was completely silent. All the examinees were speechless and their eyes revealed an anxious expression. After that, other than Lu and the other examinees all threw themselves into the Green Mountains and quickly disappeared. Why are they so anxious? Isn't there someone who has time runes? Lu was somewhat puzzled and asked. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. You're the strange one. You're the only one who's not in a hurry. A month was actually quite tight. Sensing the divine monuments required a process. Even if they could communicate with the divine monuments and light them up, it would take a lot of time. They had to light up 30 divine monuments before they could enter the Rune Academy to study. In other words, they had to light up at least one divine monument a day. It sounded like it was very easy, but in reality, it was very difficult. Many people could not light up one divine monument in a few days. Some people could light up several in a day. In short, there was no way to use probability to calculate. That was why these examinees were so anxious to go to the Green Mountain, hoping to seize the time to study. Lu looked into the distance and saw the figures flashing in the Green Mountain. Soon, these figures had disappeared. I don't think you are in a hurry. He turned to look at Elizabeth and the others and said, Then aren't you in a hurry? Why are you still standing here? Haha, we don't care. We know what we are capable of. That's right. We are already satisfied to be able to enter the Divine Monument Garden. Just treat it as a visit. Rexton and the other two smiled elegantly. They knew very well that lighting up 30 divine monuments was an extremely difficult task. They planned to let nature take its course and light up as many as they could. Hence, they were not in a hurry to leave. As for Kamiya, she wanted to follow Lu. After all, he was her man. It was normal for her to follow him. Moreover, she was very confident in herself and Lu. Lighting up 30 divine monuments within a month should not be too difficult. However, it was not easy to say this in front of everyone. Coincidentally, Elizabeth looked at Lu solemnly and said, Your teacher did not teach you anything. I would like to see how you light up these divine monuments. I will follow you to see. When Kamiya heard this, her eyes lit up and she said, I will follow you to see how you light up these divine monuments too. Lu was speechless. These two women actually wanted to follow him. They were here to light up the divine monuments. Those who did not know would think that he was taking two beauties on a field trip. However, he did not refuse. He nodded and said, All right, what about you guys? Lu looked at Rexton and the others. There's no need for us, we're just taking a walk. Ha ha ha, I won't disturb you. Rexton and Lorca hurriedly waved their hands, their faces showing that they understood. After saying that, they left first and walked into the depths of the Green Mountains. Vivian didn't say anything. She felt a little upset. She also wanted to follow 13, but she knew that she didn't have the qualifications, so she could only follow Rexton and the others and leave. Then let's go. Lu took the two beauties and began to take a walk in the Divine Monument Garden. It was spring now, and the Divine Monument Garden was full of verdant green plants. It was full of vitality, and there were many flowers and trees in the forest. The scenery was indeed very good. He walked and stopped in the forest, with his hands behind his back as he looked around. There wasn't the slightest hint of anxiety on his face. Instead, he looked like a tourist visiting. Because of the cover of the lush forest, it was very difficult for the people outside the Divine Monument Garden to see the scene inside the garden clearly. However, the people inside the garden could clearly see the outside. Many of the examinees who were walking on the mountain path had noticed his great presence. When they realized that he had not climbed the mountain but was touring at the foot of the mountain, they were all shocked. It was actually very normal for everyone to be shocked that Lu had not climbed the mountain. After that, the emotions in everyone's hearts were different. Some people felt that he was deliberately pretending to be calm. This kind of behavior was extremely stupid. They did not understand why he did this. He only had 1 month. What was the use of pretending to be calm? Some people even felt that there was something wrong with his mental state. The Divine Monument Garden was a continuous green mountain. It was very large. It was not easy to walk along the mountain path. It was especially so when Lu walked and stopped like this. He also had to look at the flowers and trees. He even saw a pond. He also needed to see if there were any fish in the pond, so he was not in a hurry at all. It took him more than 2 hours to reach the foot of the mountain. At this time, the examinees could no longer be seen on the mountain. Although they were very surprised by Lu's behavior and stopped to observe for a while, they would not waste their precious time because of this matter. They were already in a hurry to find the divine monuments scattered in different places and began to comprehend them. Camilla and Elizabeth could not help but frown when they saw Lu's overly calm appearance. However, the two of them did not say anything. After all, they were the ones who wanted to follow him. Lu was looking at the patterns formed by the 5 colored stones on the road when he suddenly heard the rumbling sound of water. He subconsciously looked up in the direction of the sound and saw a silver waterfall pouring out from the cliff of the Green Mountain. It landed on the cliff that was hundreds of feet high and splashed in all directions like pearls splashing on jade. Seeing this beautiful scene, his first reaction was that the cliff in the Divine Monument Garden was really steep. There weren't many trees, and he didn't see a single divine monument. Then, his gaze followed the direction of the deep pool formed by the waterfall. He saw an extremely wide black stone platform in front of him. There was obviously a canal that had been dug by someone. The waterfall that poured down from the cliff flowed along the canal into the distance. He followed the direction of the canal and saw that the water in the canal was incomparably clear. The white stones under it shone like pearls. Before long, he came to the south of the Divine Monument Garden. The sound of the waterfall could no longer be heard. At the end of the canal, he saw a mountain path. This mountain path could lead deep into the mountains. It was a straight path that extended from the foot of the mountain to the top of the Divine Monument Garden. Elizabeth and Camilla also saw this mountain path. However, they immediately realized the origin of this mountain path and slowly explained. This path should be the closest to reach the Divine Monument Garden. However, the Rune Academy forbids anyone from passing through this mountain path. Only under special circumstances can the principal and teachers of the Rune Academy walk on this mountain path. Lu was greatly puzzled and asked in surprise, "There's such a thing? Only under special circumstances can one pass? We don't know the reason either. In short, this is a rule of the Academy, and we've only heard about it from others." This mountain path did not have any stone houses. There were no trees on either side, only some huge rocks. Anyone who saw this path would definitely have a strong urge to walk along it. Compared to other roads, this road was much shorter and much more convenient. But they had never had the courage to go against the Academy's ban and walk on this road. Other than Lu, the examinees who came to participate in the test also knew the existence of this road. Moreover, in their understanding, this road was called the Divine Path. They did not know the reason, however, they did not have the courage to violate the Academy's ban. At the beginning of this path, at the end of the canal, there was a pavilion. A person was sitting in the pavilion. That person was wearing worn-out armor. The armor was full of rust, covering his body. From head to toe, not a single shining part of it was exposed. The man was holding an old broadsword in his hand. There were many holes in the blade. It was hard to imagine how many fierce battles this broadsword had gone through to become like this. Even the blade was broken. The broadsword was pressed against the ground. The man stood with the sword in his hand. Looking from afar, the man in full armor was like a statue. Sometimes, people would even wonder if there was a person in the armor. But Lu knew that it was a person, not a statue. He could sense the breathing of the person in the armor. At the same time, the person in the armor also sensed Lu's perception. He suddenly opened his eyes, as if there was a cold flash. This pair of emotionless eyes was extremely cold. He looked at Lu as if he was looking at an ant. Lu was also surprised. He did not sense the strength of the person wearing the armor. He was like a piece of wood, not emitting any fluctuations. But when he opened his eyes, Lu saw an extremely powerful aura and killing intent in his eyes. His heart could not help but jump. This person was very strong. He was far stronger than anyone he had ever seen. In Lu's memory, only the person in Earl Wilson's mansion, with whom he had felt a spiritual connection, had such a feeling. However, he did not know who that person was. However, the person in armor in front of him gave him a real sense of power. It was as if he was a machine that was born for killing. As long as Lu dared to walk on this mountain road, he had no doubt that this person would immediately kill him. Even if he had powerful runes, he would not be able to block this person's broadsword. This was the difference in strength, it was too wide. Of course, there was another person who was definitely stronger than this armored person. That was the Rune Academy's principal, Frank. To be able to become the Rune Academy's principal, he must be the strongest person in the Rune Academy. However, Frank had long been able to restrain his cultivation and not reveal it at all. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary old man with a kind expression. And this man who was holding a broadsword and wearing armor was exuding killing intent from his entire body. It was very clear what kind of terror he felt. This is the swordmaster guarding the Divine Monument Garden. The moment we dare to take a step forward, this swordmaster will immediately kill us. Elizabeth told him. Her face was a little pale. Similarly, under the gaze of this person wearing armor, she felt an unprecedented sense of oppression. Even though he was as arrogant as Elizabeth, when faced with the swordmasters of the Rune Academy, he simply could not bring himself to be arrogant. What is a swordmaster? Hearing Elizabeth's words, Lu was somewhat curious. Wasn't the rune world all about using runes? Why was there such a thing as a swordmaster? Elizabeth explained helplessly, this involves the study after entering the Rune Academy in the future. Swordmasters are actually also a type of rune master. It's just that the way runes are displayed is different. As long as you can enter the Rune Academy to study, you will find out in the future. Let's hurry up and leave. This path is absolutely not to be taken. You guys go ahead first. I'll walk around by myself. Don't worry, I won't be stupid. It's convenient to walk this mountain path, but I had to be alive to walk it. Lu shook his head. He planned to continue walking and take a good look at this Divine Monument Garden from the side. He believed that his system would definitely be able to analyze the contents of these divine monuments, so he wasn't in a hurry at all. A month was really ample time. According to his cautious personality, before he did something, he had to fully understand the mat. Although it looked like he was just wandering aimlessly, in reality, he was observing the Divine Monument Garden. He had a lot of time, but Kamiya, Elizabeth, and the others did not. Although they had the talent to light up 30 divine monuments without a problem, they could not waste their time like this with him. That was why he said for them to leave. All right, you take care. Hearing what Lu said, Kamiya knew what kind of person he was, so she could only agree. There was not much time. If Lu continued to stroll around like this, they would really not be able to stand it. After Kamiya and Elizabeth left, Lu continued to walk around the foot of the Green Mountain. By now, the sky was already dark and the twilight was getting thicker. The bright red sunset glow in the horizon seemed to be burning. He came to a courtyard in the southwest direction and saw a thatched cottage. The thatched cottage was built very simply and the construction was rough. The thatched grass on the eaves had not been changed for many years, and it was dark and gray. He would be in the Divine Monument Garden, so he had to find a place to stay and rest. Lu did not plan to be like those other examinees. Like headless flies. He only focused on comprehending the divine monument and ignored the other problems in his life. Since there was a thatched cottage in front of him, Lu guessed that it was a place where the monument slaves lived, so he planned to see if he could stay here. Is anyone there? He called out politely to the thatched cottage twice, but no one responded. It seemed that either there was no one living there, or the owner of the cottage was not here for the time being. After thinking about it, he walked forward and pushed the door open. He found that there were a few oranges in the thatched cottage, and the table was covered with a layer of dust. The water tank behind the door had dried up, and there was a wooden barrel. There were some rice noodles in the wooden barrel. It seemed that someone had lived here before, but that person had left some time ago. Looking at the environment in front of him, Lu could not stand it. He was used to sleeping on the big, soft bed of the Galaxy Hotel, and now he had to stay in a shabby little thatched cottage. Of course, he was not used to it. However, there was only one hut at the moment, so he had no other choice. Fortunately, cleaning wasn't a problem for Lu. He used the runes that controlled the airflow in the rocks to blow away the dust in the hut, instantly cleaning it up a lot. Then, he used the rock runes to restack the surroundings. Although it still looked a bit shabby, it was much better than before. As for the food, there was no need to worry about it. Lu's runic space stored a large amount of food, rice, and noodles, which could be eaten for a long time. First, he stewed the rice in the pot. Then, he took out a large piece of beef from the runic space and washed it in the air with a water ball. Next, he used an ice blade to cut it into pieces and lit a small fireball to roast it. Soon, an incomparably delicious savory rice was prepared. The night became heavier and heavier. The entire divine monument garden slowly darkened. The scenery was not as beautiful as before, but it gave people a more mysterious feeling. The numbers on the mountain became like shadows in the night. Waves of majestic winds blew past, and the shadows of the trees swayed. It was somewhat frightening. Just like that, Lu held the savory rice and admired the night. Of course, it was not because Lu was so noble, but because he was really bored. The runic world was good everywhere, but there was not enough entertainment. When it was dark, what could he do? Other than reading books and drinking for fun, Lu really could not think of anything better to do. So after eating, he could only take out a few books to read. However, after reading a few books, he threw them aside. These books were no longer of any use to Lu. They were all common knowledge and popular science books. Elizabeth had already taught him a lot of this knowledge these days. The next day, when the sky was slightly bright, Lu was already awake. He had slept the whole night and was full of energy. After eating breakfast, he left the thatched hut and headed north along the canal. He had only visited the one side yesterday. Today, he planned to walk around the other places at the foot of the mountain and then go up the mountain. Hearing the sounds of birds spreading their wings and flying from time to time in the mountain forest, Lu walked happily to the entrance of the Divine Monument Garden. Now he planned to officially go up the mountain and see the legendary Divine Monuments. The Divine Monuments were all in the Green Mountains, so this road was naturally the road leading to them. The road was not very steep and was paved with many stone steps, so it was very easy to walk. It was still morning. The morning sun peeked out from the horizon, illuminating the buildings in the distant capital. Under the sunlight, all kinds of strange-shaped castles appeared extremely magnificent, bathing in the golden light. The cool and awe-inspiring wind blew against Lu's face. Lu walked in the quiet mountain forest. Listening to the chirping of birds and seeing the flowers on the branches soaked in the dew, he felt very calm and stable. He was half a day behind the others, but he didn't care. Yes, this was indeed a waste of life. As he once said to Claire, music, chess, calligraphy, painting, and beautiful scenery were also a waste of life. But this was a beautiful way to waste life. However, many people could not satisfy their own needs, so they had to do something. Naturally, they did not have the right to enjoy and waste life. In the quiet and uninhabited forest, Lu walked up the stone steps alone. Not long after, he saw a divine monument. He walked to the front of the divine monument and saw that the surface of the monument was filled with horizontal slashes. There were no vertical slashes, nor were there any words. There were not even any patterns or lines. At first glance, this was just an ordinary stone monument. If he didn't use the system, Lu wouldn't be able to tell what was special about these stone monuments. However, it didn't matter. He wasn't in a hurry to communicate with these divine monuments at all. He shook his head and continued to move forward. Not far ahead, he saw another divine monument. There was a cliff here, and in front of the cliff was a thatched cottage. The divine monument was inside the thatched cottage. The thatched eaves spread out to the world. No matter how strong the wind and rain were, it would be very difficult to wet this divine monument. Lu walked into the thatched cottage and looked at the divine monument. His mind was slightly stirred. The shape of this divine monument was actually not very neat. Its thickness was not even uniform. Compared to the common stone tablets in the world, it was more like an unfinished product. The surface of the divine monument was very smooth. It was unknown how many hands had touched it. It seemed that it had been lit up many times, otherwise, this situation would not have happened. Someone had even specially built this thatched cottage in order to light it up. Lu controlled himself to not look at the contents of the stone monument. Instead, he looked at the surroundings outside the thatched cottage. The surroundings were filled with lush forests. The stone steps meandered all the way from the foot of the mountain to here. In front of him was a flat stone platform. Between the shadows of the forest, one could vaguely see the eaves of other huts in the distance. However, he could not see the road leading to other places. Looking at this scene, Lu seemed to be deep in thought. The morning light shone on the stone platform. The breeze passed through the forest. A few kingfishers chirped happily, thinking of flying into the sky. Lu came back to his senses. He looked at the divine monument in the hut. He subconsciously placed his hands behind his back and quietly began to observe. When his gaze fell on the monument, his heartbeat could not help but quicken. The surroundings of the thatched cottage were very quiet. Lu was alone. The scene yesterday was completely different. At that time, there were tens to hundreds of examinees surrounding this thatched cottage. The scene had been very quiet, but there were too many people. It was inevitable that it would be crowded. The sound of clothes rubbing against each other and footsteps did not stop. A large search went on for half the night, but the people did not leave. Instead, they lit up the lanterns in the thatched cottage. There were countless thoughts in the divine monument garden on this continent. Many sects and academies had people entering to see the divine monument. The examinees all knew that after the initial excitement, they woke up and understood that the official's offer was not something that could happen overnight. They had to take good care of their bodies and calm down the irritation in their hearts. Since they could not communicate with the divine monument for the time being, they did not have to keep fighting, they had to find a place to rest. Therefore, those examinees who had not successfully lit a divine monument yesterday had all found a place to rest in the forest. They should still be sleeping soundly at this moment. Lu weighed up the process and looked at the divine monument seriously. Different from the first divine monument that Lu had seen, the surface of this divine monument was black. There were countless thick, thin, deep, and shallow lines on it. Those lines were carved out with some sharp object. The transitions were very casual and covered the entire surface of the monument. These lines had countless teachings and appeared complicated. If one looked at them with emotion, it was as though one could add the meaning of history to them, or one could see some ancient meaning in these lines. However, if one calmed down and took out all the emotions and reverence towards the divine monument, the lines actually didn't have any pattern, nor did they have any meaning. They were like a child scribbling something on the wall. Of course, only Lu alone dared to think this way. Most people in the rune world believed that these lines were naturally formed, possessing the secrets of heaven and earth. Today was the first time Lu had seen the legendary divine monument, so he naturally didn't have the ability to make a judgment. The reason why his heart began to beat faster when his gaze landed on the monument wasn't that he understood something at first glance, nor was it because he was shocked after seeing these lines. It was just that the appearance of the legend naturally brought about an emotional fluctuation. He had seen the traces on this divine monument, or the inscriptions. There were no coincidences or miracles. Many people had seen these inscriptions that were difficult to understand because of sadness. This was because after the examinees had seen these inscriptions, they would draw these traces again according to their own memories. He had seen these lines in the past few days because Elizabeth had given him a book. The book contained records of the contents of the divine monument. However, they were meaningless. Although these inscriptions had been copied into the book, they could not be comprehended. At most, they could only show the contents of the legendary divine monument to satisfy the curiosity of the people in the rune world. Therefore, when Lu saw Elizabeth's book, he knew that it was meaningless, so he threw it aside. However, standing in front of the divine monument and seeing the lines on it with one's own eyes was a completely different matter. For thousands of years, this divine monument had been hidden in the thatched cottage, incomparably mysterious. The lines on the black divine monument were supported up in front of Lu's eyes. The mark on the lower right side of the monument that was originally deeply embedded in the stone suddenly became a bulge. The dozens of thin lines attached to its edge also left the stone surface. It actually gave people a feeling of floating. Lu knew that this was an illusion. This was a kind of interference to the real world after the spiritual power and the divine monument connected. The so-called change actually wasn't a real change. It was just a change in the light and shadow. The objective was still there. Whether it was gloomy or precious jade, whether there was this thatched cottage above the monument, whether the surface of the monument was wet or dry, dark or dazzling, the divine monument was still the same divine monument. The lines were still those lines. It changed with the position of the reference object, and the external appearance changed with the change of the environment. To determine the position, one needed to determine all the reference positions. If one wanted to observe the immutable objective facts, wouldn't one first need to understand the changes of the environment to the objective reality? The information that the students who were viewing the divine monument needed to understand, and the principles that needed to be understood, were they hidden within these changes? Standing in front of the thatched cottage, Lu just looked at the divine monument and maintained the same position for a long time without moving. He had already heard the system's prompt to analyze and retrieve the contents of these divine monuments. It proved that the system could allow him to light up all the divine monuments, so he was not worried at all. He was very relaxed. He was not in a hurry. There was still a month left. If he lit up all the divine monuments now, what would he do with the rest of the time? That would be very boring. In order to keep himself entertained, Lu was not in a hurry to use the system's ability. He was trying to see if he could use his own ability to decipher the contents of these divine monuments and light them up. The morning sun had already leapt out of the horizon. The morning glow looked at the divine monument garden from afar, sending a wave of warmth. The coldness in the morning forest was gradually dispelled. The side of the divine monument garden was dyed red by the morning glow. It was extremely beautiful. Looking at the red at the edge of the divine monument, Lu closed his eyes. He was silent for a while. He was not looking at the divine monument but was fantasizing about the surroundings of the thatched cottage. The treetops had already been dyed red by the morning glow as if they were about to burn. The faintly discernible thatched cottage in the distance made it even more difficult to determine its location. He walked up from the foot of the mountain and arrived in front of a divine monument. The road had reached the end, and there were no other divine monuments around. However, it was said that there was only one road in the divine monument garden. So what did this mean? The morning sun burned the treetops, and the light of the red rocks illuminated the previously dark cliff on one side of the thatched hut. This was the only time he saw the lines on the cliff. Different from the incomprehensible divine monument, the words on the cliff were very easy to understand because they were written in the language of the rune world. Although Lu could not understand it, he used the system to search and understood what it meant. It was a short poem. 2,000 years ago, a talisman king left it on the cliff after he had entered the divine monument garden. He had felt something when he visited the divine monument. Lu was not interested in short poems. He thought it would be more interesting to play some moving music. Therefore, he only took a quick look and then stopped looking. From the time he got to the thatched cottage to the time he left, it took him less than 10 minutes to turn around and leave without any hesitation. After leaving the divine monument, he walked down the mountain path. When he turned around a corner, he saw Kamiya and Elizabeth. He did not expect the two of them to be so early. Kamiya and Elizabeth were also a little surprised. They had not expected to meet Lu. "You guys are so early," they greeted him with a smile. "We don't like the bustle. We don't want to crowd together with those examinees to watch." Kamiya gave a very convincing reason. After all, both of them were very proud women. Usually, it was difficult to even see them from afar, let alone stay by their side. As for Lu, he had no entertainment at night and he was bored. He could only go to bed early and have a good sleep until he woke up naturally. Looking at the smoke drifting in the forest at the foot of the mountain, he reminded them, everyone has woken up. If no one disturbs you when you want to view the monuments, it's best to hurry up. Kamiya and Elizabeth nodded and left with smiles. During their conversation, they realized that they had lit up some divine monuments. Lu pinched his chin and looked at them walk away. He sighed, the talent of those two girls is really amazing. Kamiya was the #1 genius of the Simon Empire, and Elizabeth had an extraordinary background. She was part of the royal family of the Dawn Empire, and her talent was one of the best. In fact, her talent was even better than Kamiya's. Lighting up the divine monuments was not difficult for them, but they did not know how many they would be able to light up. Lu continued to walk down the mountain and met a middle-aged man in a long robe on the mountain path. The middle-aged man was one of the monument slaves who had appeared at the gate of the divine monument garden yesterday. Thinking that these monument slaves had dedicated their youth and lives to the divine monument garden, everyone was somewhat respectful. Lu was no exception. He respectfully looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man did not return the greeting. He did not even nod his head. However, he did not leave either. Instead, he looked at Lu coldly. Lu frowned and felt a little uneasy. "Sir, is there something you need?" The middle-aged man shook his head and did not say anything. This made Lu feel a little surprised. "Why are you looking at me like that if there's nothing?" Just as he was feeling bewildered, the middle-aged man slowly opened his mouth. His voice was very strange and extremely hoarse as if he had not spoken for a long time. You're very special." After he finished speaking, he looked at Lu with a profound gaze, as if he wanted to see through him, but unfortunately, he could not see anything. He could only withdraw his gaze and turn around to leave. Lu was left alone, completely confused. He did not understand what this middle-aged man meant. The examinees who had just woken up and walked out of the thatched cottage by the side, after hearing the middle-aged man's words, all looked at Lu in unison, as if they wanted to see what was special about him. With this look, everyone's eyes lit up. What a handsome youth. The youth stepped in the morning sunlight and came over. His entire body was bathed in golden light, like a statue of a god. Even though these examinees were all youths in their prime, the moment they saw Lu, they were shocked for a moment. At the same time, they felt ashamed of their inferiority. However, other than this, they could not see anything special about Lu. Could it be because of his earth-shattering handsomeness? Alright, in terms of looks, Lu was indeed too special. Lu was also filled with confusion. He naturally did not think that the middle-aged man had said this to him because of his looks. The existence of the monument slaves was very special. They came from the examinees who had participated in the assessment but had not left. There were also some rune masters from the 9 great empires who had come because of their fame and voluntarily stayed in the Divine Monument Garden. Their goal was to comprehend all the divine monuments in an attempt to obtain the profound mysteries of the runes of the ancient sages. This was much more powerful than the inheritance and teachings of the Rune Academy. Therefore, these monument slaves who were willing to devote their youth and lives to the Divine Monument Garden simply could not suddenly speak to him because of his appearance. They only had the divine monuments in their hearts. Therefore, the middle-aged man must have sensed the divine monument, but he did not specifically sense anything special about Lu. The monument slaves were not ordinary people. On the contrary, their strength was very powerful. The process of comprehending the divine monuments over these years had made their strength receive an incomprehensible increase. Although they did not receive systematic teaching, they were not weak. It seemed that they had truly comprehended the profound mysteries of the runes from the 12 ancient human sages within these divine monuments. No matter where they were placed, the monument slaves were extremely powerful existences. The most terrifying thing was not their combat strength, but their soul perception and spiritual power. This was because, in order to light the divine monument and comprehend the contents of the divine monument's inheritance, one had to have extraordinary soul perception and spiritual power. At the same time, during the process of silently comprehending the divine monument for so many years, their spiritual power and soul perception were constantly improving. That was why the middle-aged man just now had noticed a slight difference in Lu. But that was all. It was impossible for him to see what secrets he had. Lu shook his head and did not continue to think about this matter. Instead, he continued to walk along the mountain road, aimlessly strolling until he saw a courtyard. This courtyard was much smaller than the thatched cottage he had stayed in yesterday. The courtyard was surrounded by a fence, and there were a few ugly green trees planted inside. It was very quiet. There was no one living inside, so Lu walked into the courtyard. There was a stone tablet in the courtyard. He took out a pen, ink, and paper from the runic space, and then quietly looked at the surrounding environment. As time passed, the sun gradually rose, and the angle at which the light fell on the courtyard also changed. The fences around the courtyard were sparse, and they were on the verge of collapse. Because no one had lived there for a long time, everything was somewhat dilapidated and needed to be repaired. As the light changed, the trees in the courtyard also changed. The mottled shadows of the trees reflected on the ground took on strange shapes. Some places were heavier, and some were lighter. Lu watched this scene quietly. As he watched these changes, his consciousness returned to the thatched cottage in the early morning. When the sun had just risen, the lines on the surface of the divine monument changed with the warm red glow of the morning sun, as if they were coming to life. The complicated and inexplicable lines on the divine monument were the inscriptions. The inscriptions that had endured countless storms for countless years had never changed. However, weren't they changing all the time? If the information hidden in those inscriptions was certain, why couldn't the examinees use a unified method to light up these divine monuments? Why couldn't they comprehend the profound mysteries of the runes contained in the divine monument? All of this was because of these changes. Lu dipped the pen in some ink, flipped open the notebook, and began to draw on it. He did not use words to record what he saw. He only followed what he saw and could roughly deduce. He began to draw the lines that he saw on the divine monument. His hand was confident, without the slightest deviation. He began to slowly draw those lines. After an unknown amount of time, he stopped and redrew the lines on the divine monument. Then, he took out the book that Elizabeth had given him that had the contents of the divine monument drawn on it and compared them. He found that there was a big difference between the two. Compared to the inscriptions on the divine monument, the drawings that he had etched into the notebook were clearly more moving. Unfortunately, his drawing skills were average. He relied on his precise control to copy them according to his memory. If his drawing skills were a little better, perhaps he could make the pictures on his notebook jump on the paper as expected. The fog in the forest dispersed, and the dew on the treetops had also dried up. The courtyard was incomparably bright. Before he knew it, it was already noon. Lu rubbed his slightly sore eyes and closed them to rest for a while. He felt that his stomach was a little hungry, so he prepared to get up and make lunch. Only then did he realize that none of the examinees had returned. The courtyard was quiet because of the rising temperature. Even the birds in the forest could not be bothered to call out their names. He stood alone in front of the door and felt a little bored. After eating something, he returned to his room and closed his eyes to rest for a while. Then, he returned to the stone table in the courtyard. With a notebook in his left hand and a pen in his right hand, he continued to look at the scenery around the courtyard. He began to daydream. The light was constantly changing with time, so he had to observe it all the time. Time passed slowly. As the sun gradually set in the west, the color of the light that fell on the courtyard gradually became denser. After quietly watching for a long time, Lu finally began to write again. He used the brush to draw all the changes he had observed throughout the entire afternoon on the paper. Of course, he had to rely on his own feelings, so the lines he drew were not accurate. However, he had a strange feeling. In the evening, he looked at the inscriptions on the divine monument on the paper again. He smiled and the corners of his mouth curled up. He knew that he was not far from understanding these inscriptions. When he understood these inscriptions, he would be able to light up the divine monument. At this moment, the examinees who had stayed in this courtyard the previous night had also returned to the courtyard. The first one to return was a thin youth. Lu nodded at him in greeting. However, it was as if he did not see it at all. Instead, he directly walked into the house and drank a large mouthful of water. Then, he walked back into the courtyard and sat at the door with a somewhat dazed expression. Following that, a few more youths returned to the courtyard. These youths all had somewhat muddled expressions. Although they did not forget to greet Lu, after entering the house, they almost knocked their heads against the door. After a while, they walked out of the house again. For some unknown reason, they all lowered their heads and began to walk around the courtyard. Their mouths kept muttering, and no one knew what they were saying. One of the examinees stepped on the grass and looked at the setting sun in the distance. He had a complicated expression. The other examinee walked around the courtyard. His mouth kept muttering as if he had been possessed. In short, these people were very strange. These were examinees from the 9 great empires. Those who could pass the first round of the talent test were not ordinary. These people were dressed in luxurious clothes. Lu also had some impression of them. He had seen these people at the entrance of the Divine Monument Garden yesterday. With his current perception, he already had a photographic memory. At first, Lu was a little surprised that these people all had strange looks on their faces. However, he immediately thought that they must have studied the Divine Monument for a day. He felt some enlightenment in his heart. At this moment, he was still in a state of thinking, so he did not continue to disturb his thoughts. The twilight was getting thicker, and more examinees returned to the courtyard. Rexton and Lorca had also come to this courtyard, which made Lu feel a little joy that was hard to resist. Rexton was much more normal than the others, and his face did not show any special emotions. After seeing Lu, his eyes also lit up, and he was very happy. However, Lorca was not in a good condition. His condition was worse than the examinees in the courtyard. As if he was drunk, he kept shouting, "I can hold on for a little longer. I can hold on for a little longer." Lu asked, "Are you alright?" "I'm fine. It's just that I used up too much spiritual energy. To light the divine monument, I have to comprehend the contents of the monument. This consumes a lot of spiritual energy." Rexton sighed and pressed on the back of Lorca's head. The drunk Lorca immediately fell asleep and was thrown to the ground. Lu could not use his spiritual energy when he was looking at the divine monument. Looking at Lorca's appearance and the examinees in the courtyard who were obsessed, he thought that it made sense to be careful. In the end, Vivian also returned to the courtyard. Her face was full of fatigue. She dragged her body and walked back step by step. When he saw Vivian, his tired face showed a trace of surprise, then turned into joy. However, a strong sense of fatigue surged in his mind, made Lorca unable to say anything. He could only look at her, then, he went back to sleep. Seeing the state of Lorca and the others, Lu shook his head. How could this light up the divine monument? Looking at the half-dead faces, this was simply killing him. However, looking at their weak appearance, as friends, Lu obviously had to do something. He walked to the kitchen and cooked a sumptuous dinner. Then, he went to call for Rexton and the other two to eat. Lorca and Vivian struggled to get out of bed. However, when they smelled the food Lu had cooked, they were immediately energized. Before they started eating, they seemed to have recovered some of their energy. Hurry up and eat. Once you're full, your spiritual energy will recover faster. Lu looked at them and found it a little funny. As expected of the 13th young master, his cooking actually has the effect of recovering spirit. Rexton chuckled and picked up a piece of beef and stuffed it into his mouth. Lorca and Vivian also started eating. After taking a bite of the food, their eyes suddenly lit up. The delicious taste blossomed on the tip of their tongues. Their spirits were much better, and they immediately began to eat large mouthfuls. It was as if they had been reincarnated from a hungry ghost. Their speed was extremely fast. Vivian knew that it was because they had consumed too much energy and needed food to make up for it. Other than meditation and rest, the replenishment of mental strength could also promote its recovery. Therefore, after eating their fill, the condition of Lorca and the others was obviously much better, and their mental strength had also recovered. Rexton deliberately put down the bowl and chopsticks in his hand and said to Lorca, "Lorca, are you still unwilling to leave that divine monument?" Lorca said somewhat helplessly, "Those who are not as strong as me are still persisting in front of it. I clearly can still look at it for a little longer." Rexton sighed, "You also know how sacred the divine monument is. How can it be comprehended in a day? Why do you have to fight to the death against that divine monument?" Lorca replied with some distress, "The divine monument garden is only open for a month. We only have a chance to stay in the Rune Academy if we light up 30 divine monuments. I don't want to give up. I want to stay in the Rune Academy." Lorca's talent was a little better than Rexton's. Among the three of them, he was the most determined to get into the Rune Academy. That was why Lorca kept fighting against the divine monument. If it wasn't for Rexton pulling him back, he probably wouldn't eat or drink until he lit up a divine monument. Rexton's talent was the most average. He hadn't lit up a divine monument today, but he didn't care. His mentality was different from theirs. To be able to pass the first round of the test and pass it was already beyond his expectations. He originally had planned to accompany Lorca and the others to the Rune Academy to take a look. It would be good to be able to enter, but it didn't matter if he didn't. Thus, it was because of this mentality that he didn't really care whether he lit up the divine monument or not. Out of the three of them, he was the most normal. As for Vivian, although she also yearned for the Rune Academy, she wasn't as persistent as Lorca. She could only say that she was doing her best. The reason why she was so weak wasn't that she was fighting to the death against the runes, but because she had lit up a divine monument. To be able to light up a divine monument on the first day could be considered a pretty good result. Many examinees were like Lorca and Rexton, who had obtained nothing on the first day. To light up a divine monument, one had to communicate with it to a certain extent and understand its contents. This process was extremely taxing on one's mental strength, which was why Vivian was extremely weak. Hearing Lorca's words, Lu shook his head and softly advised, "This is only the first divine monument. What's the rush?" Lorca sighed, "It's precisely because this is only the first divine monument that I'm in a rush." Lu frowned. "There are 108 divine monuments in the entire divine monument garden. If this one isn't enough, why don't we just change it to another one? What's there to be stubborn about?" Lu did not understand Lorca's actions. He said helplessly, "The more divine monuments are outside, the more times they are lit up. So this means that the divine monuments outside are simpler. Of course, this is also related to chance, but the further through the divine monument, the more difficult it is." Lu shook his head but did not refute. Elizabeth had said that there was no such thing as simple or difficult in these 108 divine monuments, and there was no specific method to light them up. It depended on a person's wisdom, luck, ability to understand, and other factors. Some people might not be able to understand the contents of the divine monuments at the time, but after a few days, they would look back and suddenly understand, and they would be able to light them up immediately. Lorca said that the divine monument outside was easier to light up, and the deeper into the Green Mountains, the harder it was. This was a kind of empiricism, but it did not mean that it was correct. It could only be said that these divine monuments were just right for them. But now, it was obvious that the divine monument that Lorca and Rexton had chosen was not very suitable for the two of them. But Lorca still chose to continue fighting to the death. Doing so would only consume spiritual power, and it would be a waste of time. However, Lorca could not listen to these words at all. He had already fallen into a kind of emotional obsession because he cared too much about the results and would often be more extreme. Therefore, Lu did not intend to continue to persuade him. Instead, he casually said, "I have yet to light up a divine monument." "What? 13, you have yet to light up a divine monument? That's impossible. You must be joking, right? I guess you haven't even gone to see the divine monument." "Ha, I know you too well. I reckon that you plan to go all out and have a good rest first before going to study the divine monument. Then you will casually light up 4 or 5 divine monuments in a day." When the three of them heard Lu's words, they all had astonished expressions. But very quickly, they understood. Lu couldn't even light up a divine monument? Who was he kidding? They had all seen Luff's talent. Even Vivian had lit one, let alone Luff. So they guessed that either he was joking, or he hadn't even tried to comprehend those divine monuments. Lu smiled. "I really haven't lit up a divine monument." He was telling the truth. To light up a divine monument, he needed to release his spiritual power to communicate with it. He took a few casual glances at the divine monument before leaving. If he used his spiritual power to communicate with the divine monument, or if he used the help of the system, he could also light up the divine monument. However, Lu was not in a hurry. "I saw too many people. I just took a casual glance and left. I'll look at it another day." Lu saw that they did not believe him and casually found an excuse. Rexton and the rest nodded. Lorca sighed. "Sigh, only 13 can be so willful. We humans don't even have time, yet you don't care about the world." "But that's true. If you really want to light up the divine monument, it would be a very easy thing. When that time comes, lighting up 4 or 5 in a day would be enough to shock everyone." Hearing what Lorca said, Lu was slightly surprised. Could it be that there will be a day when examinees can comprehend 4 or 5 divine monuments? That's right. Some people can only light up 1 divine monument a day. Being able to light up 1 every day is already considered pretty good, but there are always some monsters that are different from the rest. This made Lu feel a little surprised. He had tried it himself. Even though he could light up these divine monuments without using the system, the time needed to do so would never stop. What kind of existence could light up 4 or 5 sides in a day? Seeing Lu's somewhat surprised look, Vivian perked up and said, "Although there are few people like this, there are quite a few in the history of the Rune Academy over thousands of years. Let's not talk about the distant ones. Just take the current number 1 genius, Ike. Ike is also the only person in the past 100 years who could light all 108 divine monuments, shocking the 9 great empires. Back then, Ike was able to light all 5 divine stels in 1 day, and used over 20 days to light all the divine stels." Lu's eyes lit up. He had already heard of Ike countless times, and he had already heard of the publicly acknowledged number 1 genius of the Rune world from the 9 great empires. The only person in several hundred years who was able to light all the divine monuments. Other than Ike, in the past few decades, there have also been 1 or 2 examinees who were able to light up 4 or 5 sides in a day. These people all became famous rune makers in the world. There was also 1 examinee who was more special. This person did not gain anything in the first 29 days. Everyone thought that he would definitely be eliminated by the academy. However, on the last day, he sat cross-legged on a divine monuments. Who knew that the moment the sun set and the stone doors of the divine monuments garden opened, he lit up 100 divine monuments. This person is the current head of the Rune Academy, Soros. Before Ike, Soros was known as the number 1 genius of the Rune world. Oh, hearing about Solo's past, Lu was obviously more interested. Being able to light up 4 or 5 divine monuments in a day and lighting up all the divine monuments proved that Ike was indeed the number 1 genius of the Rune world. but these Lu could also use the system to do so. However, Soros was different. Soros' story was clearly more interesting. All the examinees only had a month's time. After a month, the assessment would be over. At that time, those examinees who did not light up 30 divine monuments would be eliminated by the Academy. Soros actually did not light up the divine monuments for the first 29 days, which was questioned by all the examinees. When everyone thought that he was going to be eliminated by the Academy, Soros lit up 100 divine monuments in one go on the last day? This was a little interesting. In the end, this person had actually already comprehended these divine monuments before, but didn't light them up. He waited for the last day to light them up directly, so that he could show off in front of all the examinees. Or was it really just that he didn't gain anything in the first 29 days, and suddenly had a burst of luck on the last day? But no matter what, the story of Soros lighting up 100 divine monuments on the last day sounded much better. Why don't I try it myself? I can definitely light up a divine monuments anyway. What would happen if I light up all the divine monuments on my last day? The next person to write legendary history would probably be me. Lu did not know why he had such a thought. He was probably bored and wanted to find something to do. However, for the sake of caution, and because he had a lot of free time, Lu decided to first look through these divine monuments. It seems that the rune world still has a lot of monsters. However, don't be discouraged. Everyone has their own opportunities. Until the last moment, who knows what the outcome will be? All the best, everyone. Lu especially encouraged his little friends. In his heart, he still hoped that Rexton and the others could stay in the Rune Academy. After saying this, Lu left and found a room. Lorca and the others had spent a large amount of spiritual power studying the divine monuments for a day. Although they felt better after eating, it was still limited. The most important thing now was to rest well. Perhaps I can use my mental energy to pass on my comprehension of the divine monuments to Rexton and the others. This way, they can stay in the Rune Academy. In the room, an idea flashed through Lu's mind. Comprehending the divine monuments wasn't difficult for him. Moreover, as long as he used the system, he could instantly comprehend it. Then, he only needed to communicate with the divine monuments and light it up. Using his own spiritual power, he would be able to transmit his comprehension to Rexton and the others, ensuring that they could light up the 30 divine monuments. Then, they wouldn't be eliminated by the Academy. Moreover, Lu had also thought that only 30 divine monuments would be enough. After all, if there were too many, the Academy would also feel that it was very strange. After all, with a certain level of talent, one could see how many divine monuments an examinee could light up. Although it was not absolute, it still served as a reference. In any case, he would be able to pass the test with 30, so Lu decided to give it a try and help Rexton and the others. The next day, early morning, a few cool bird songs woke Lu up. He and Rexton and the others had a sumptuous breakfast, then continued to walk on the mountain path alone, intending to take a look at the next divine monument. Not long after, he arrived in front of a divine monument. At this moment, the sky was clear and bright. The morning sun was emitting a dazzling golden light that dyed the surface of the monument golden. On the surface of the divine monument, among the extremely complicated lines, the depth of these lines varied. This was caused by the different strength used when carving. Ding! The system has discovered new text content. Do you wish to retrieve it? The system's notification sounded in his mind. Yes. Lu nodded. Soon, the system began to retrieve the contents of the divine monument, continuously analyzing the color of the lines on the divine monument. These lines were lifelike, as if they had come to life. They floated in front of Lu, like a 5-line score with the contents of a piano piece on it. Search content successful. Soon, the system did not disappoint Lu. It successfully searched the contents of these lines on the divine monument, and Lu's mind suddenly had an indescribable feeling. Lu knew that if he tried to communicate with these divine monuments now, he would be able to light them up immediately. But he didn't need to light up the divine monuments so quickly. He had to wait until the last day to light up all the divine monuments. There were 2 reasons why he would retrieve the contents of this divine monument. The first was to confirm if the system could really analyze the contents of the divine monument so that he could light it up. From the looks of it, there was no problem at all. It was very easy. The second was to pass on his understanding of the divine monuments to Rexton and the others. He would help them light up the 30 divine monuments so that they would not be eliminated by the Academy. They would be able to stay in the academy to study. This way, Lu would not lose these friends. The rest of his time was very simple. Lu would wander around the Divine Monument garden. He would not be able to search for the Divine Monument. Instead, he would bump into a Divine Monument and analyze the contents of these Divine Monuments. On this day, Lorca, Rexton, and the others were standing in front of a Divine Monument. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at the contents of the Divine Monument. There were lines of different depths on the Divine Monument. However, they were different from the Divine Monument that Lu had seen for the first time. However, they were all expressed in lines. Their eyes were bloodshot as they widened their eyes in an attempt to see through the lines in order to communicate with the Divine Monument and light it up. Unfortunately, after looking at it for half a day, they did not gain anything. As for why there were only the two of them, it was because Vivian was much better than them. In the past few days, she had lit up a few Divine Monument, but the two of them hadn't lit up a single Divine Monument yet. The progress was different, so Vivian didn't stay with the two of them. Instead, she went alone to search for a new Divine Monument. Around them was the same group of examinees. These people also had confused expressions. There were more than 3,000 examinees, and there were quite a few like Rexton and the others. To be precise, most of them were like them. They hadn't gained anything in the past few days. Not to mention lighting up the Divine Monument, they couldn't even understand the profound meaning behind the lines on the Divine Monuments. Some people sat cross-legged on the ground, their hands supporting their heads. Their faces were filled with confusion. Some people shook their heads and walked around the Divine Monument, trying to gain some inspiration through this method. There were also some people who gathered together and kept discussing. They hoped to use the power of everyone to explain the contents of the Divine Monument. In short, there were all kinds of methods, all kinds of strange. Rexton and Lorca sat in front of the Divine Monument. They stared at the Divine Monument, wishing they could drill into it. Suddenly, some understanding appeared in their minds. There was no reason. It was just a sudden. The lines in front of their eyes seemed to come alive, floating in front of their eyes. The magical scene made their mouths slightly open, unable to believe it. Soon, they understood some of the meanings these lines represented. They began to understand the contents of the Divine Monument. Rexton and Lorca didn't have time to be surprised. Taking advantage of the fact that the comprehension in their minds hadn't disappeared, they hurriedly poured their spiritual power into the Divine Monument, and began to use their spiritual power to communicate with this Divine Monument. A moment later, they successfully communicated with the Divine Monument. There seemed to be layers of words inside the Divine Monument that peeled off in front of them. They saw the runic mysteries belonging to the 12 sages. Although they only saw a corner, just this little bit of content was enough for them to benefit endlessly. It laid a solid foundation for them to become powerful rune masters in the future. At the same time, this Divine Monument began to light up slightly. Everyone present looked at this scene in shock. It was hard to believe that this Divine Monument was actually lit up by Rexton and Lorca. Especially for those who had already lit up a few Divine Monument, it was even harder to believe. They had all heard that Rexton and Lorca hadn't lit up a single Divine Monument until now. Even their talent was the weakest light green talent. Such examinees would definitely be eliminated. But now, Rexton and Lorca had lit up a Divine Monument. They still did not understand what the lines on the Divine Monument represented. Soon, everyone looked at the two of them with envious expressions. Being able to light up a Divine Monument, Rexton and Lorca were naturally very happy. This was the first time they had lit up a Divine Monument in so many days. They were so excited that they almost cried. Rexton and Lorca held their heads and laughed loudly. As they celebrated, they could not help but feel a little confused. The insights in their minds came out of thin air. Why did they have more insights about the Divine Monument in their minds? This could not have been their own insights. It was just that in a flash, their minds had a lot more understanding of the lines of the Divine Monument. It was as if someone had forced it into their minds. The two of them were confused, but fortunately, the Divine Monument was lit up. Under everyone's envious gazes, Rexton and Lorca left. Lorca, tell me what's going on. Why is there an epiphany about the Divine Monument in my mind? This epiphany is extremely clear. I just used a little spiritual power to communicate with the Divine Monument, and it lit up the Divine Monument. Me too. I don't understand why. Could it be that the Goddess of Luck is looking out for us? The Goddess of Luck? Rexton was stunned. What the hell was the goddess of luck? However, he saw that Lorca's face was filled with excitement. You don't know? There's no specific way to light up these divine monuments. It's related to a person's wisdom, luck, and so on. Perhaps we were blessed by the goddess of luck, and that's why we were able to light up these things. Rexton's mouth opened slightly. Hearing what you said, there's a possibility. At the same time, the confusion on his face instantly disappeared. No matter what, being able to light the divine monument was a good thing. Go, go, go. Let's hurry to the next divine monument. Lorca rushed to the next divine monument anxiously. And Lu, who was invisible beside Rexton and the others, was speechless. These two guys actually thought that Lady Luck was looking out for them. This realization was clearly sent to your minds by my own spiritual power, okay? How could it be Lady Luck? But the ridicule was just ridicule. Lu was not angry. When he saw that they had lit up the divine monument, Lu was happy for them. However, Lu did not plan to let them continue to light up the divine monuments for now. After all, if the two of them lit up a few divine monuments in a row, it would attract unnecessary attention. Moreover, it would also cause them to rely on the mental state. First, let them meditate properly. When the time came, Lu would help them. Thus, Lu did not follow them. Instead, he went to find Vivian. Although Vivian had already lit up a few divine monuments, her speed was not fast. According to her efficiency, it was very likely that by the end of the test, Vivian would not be able to light up 30 divine monuments. They were all Lu's friends. Of course, Lu would not discriminate. He treated everyone the same. Just like that, a month passed in the blink of an eye. This month, Lu had already used the system to search through all the divine monuments. After all, every now and then, he would help Rexton and the others light up the divine monuments. Under Lu's deliberate restrictions, Rexton and Lorca lit up 33 divine stels. This result could be considered to be the lowest. But at the very least, they had passed the qualifying line and could remain in the Rune Academy. And Vivian, with Lu's help, lit up the 41 divine monuments. This result was also average, but Vivian was very satisfied. She had never thought that she would actually be able to pass the talent test. It was all thanks to that mysterious comprehension. Sometimes, Vivian even gave up on comprehending the divine monuments. Suddenly, a mysterious comprehension appeared in her mind. With the help of this mysterious epiphany, Vivian was able to light up the 41 divine monuments. Vivian was very grateful. She always felt that someone was deliberately helping her. She even felt that it was young Master 13 who was helping her. But when she was deliberately comprehending the divine monument, she paid attention to her surroundings. She didn't see young Master 13 at all. However, a woman's intuition told Vivian that the person who was helping her was very likely to be 13. As for Elizabeth and Camia, they had actually lit up 95 divine monuments. Their talents were on par. He didn't expect that even the number of divine monuments lit up would be the same. He originally thought that the number of divine monuments lit up by Elizabeth and Camia would definitely be the highest among the examinees this time. However, he never expected that there would actually be someone who could light up more divine monuments than them. That was the number one genius of the Illumination Empire, Zoro. Before this, they had already heard of Zoro's great name. He had been praised as a genius since he was young and had condensed many powerful runes. And this time, Zoro had lit up 99 divine monuments. It was only one side less than the head of the educational administration, Soros. However, this was enough to attract everyone's attention. As for Camia and the others, they no longer planned to light up the divine monuments on the last day. They had already tried to communicate with all the divine monuments, and 95 of them were already their limit, so they did not continue to waste their efforts. Every time they asked how many divine monument had Lu lit up, Lu answered very sincerely that he had not lit any up yet. However, they did not believe it. In their eyes, Lu's talent was definitely not simple. His strength even surpassed Elizabeth's. How could such a Lu not light up one of them? They thought that Lu was joking with them. All the way until the last day. Lu went to try lighting up his first divine monument. It was very easy. Without any effort, he successfully lit up the divine monument. Then, he went to the second divine monument. At this time, there were still some people surrounding the divine monument. These people had obviously been sitting here for a long time. Although it was the last day, they had not given up on comprehending. Some people frowned and cried to death. while some people muttered to themselves. Among these people, he saw some familiar faces. In the Divine Monument Garden, Lu would sometimes meet some examinees that he often met, and he would occasionally greet them. The examinee who knew Lu raised his head when he heard the sound of footsteps. When he saw that it was him, he could not help but be surprised. Some people also noticed Lu's arrival and were just as stunned as that examinee. These days, these people who were comprehending the Divine Monument had already gotten used to it. Lu strolled through the forest and never went to comprehend the Divine Monuments, much less attempt to light it up. They all knew that Lu did not light up a single Divine Monument. They were not like Rexton and the others. They did not understand Lu at all. They only believed in the situation in front of them. Lu indeed did not light up a single divine stele. Hence, when they saw Lu trying to communicate with the Divine Monument, they actually could not react in time. In the next moment, everyone understood that he could finally solve the first Divine Monument. There was a slight commotion in the crowd, and then there was a mocking discussion. To only be able to light up the first Divine Monument now, what's there to be proud of? That's right, I've always thought that my talent wasn't that great, but now it seems that I'm at least stronger than some people. There were always some people with malicious intentions trying to figure out others. Lu wasn't proud, but his appearance brought an inexplicable pressure to these examinees. The reason why these people were still comprehending the Divine Monument was because they did not have enough lit up the Divine Monuments, but they were still unwilling to give up. They had always held on to a glimmer of hope. Now that Lu had lit up the first Divine Monument, they were instantly shocked. They were envious and jealous of Lu in their hearts. It was just like how a student in class, which had originally had average results, said that they had suddenly fallen to the last place in a certain subject. The students in the latter half of the class were still gloating, but suddenly, they discovered that the student had suddenly caught up to them. How could they not be nervous? Before this, they had also ridiculed Lu. Regarding Lu's casual walk in the forest, they scoffed. They thought that Lu was just pretending. He clearly couldn't light up the Divine Monuments, yet he still pretended to be calm. Could it be that he wanted to imitate Dean Soro's act of lighting up 100 Divine Monuments in a day? These examinees thought of the ridicule they had given to Lu a few days ago, and some of them couldn't help but feel a little flustered. In order to dissolve this kind of pressure and erase the flustered emotions, then even more excessive ridicule would naturally appear. Lu didn't pay attention to these discussions and continued walking forward. He walked into the thatched cottage, came before the divine stele, and raised his right hand. Exclamations sounded from outside the thatched cottage. The news that Lu had unlocked the first divine monument spread like the wind in the Divine Monument Garden. Many people who knew that Lu had not lit a single divine monument were instantly shocked. When Kamiya and the others heard the news, their faces revealed an indescribable shock. It couldn't be that Lu had not lit a single divine monument? They had thought that Lu was joking, but it was true. They could not help but worry for Lu. After all, today was the last day of the test. There was only one day. There was no time at all. Unless Lu could light up 100 divine monument in one day, just like Soros. But not everyone was Soros. Such a person had not appeared in hundreds of years. Although they believed in Lu's talent, they were still very worried. But they remembered that from the beginning to the end, Lu had never shown any worry. They could not help but think, could Lu light up many tablets in one day? Or was Lu doing it on purpose, just for this moment? Lu was truly a mysterious person. His actions often made people unable to guess his intentions. At this moment, an examinee beside him ran over hurriedly. His face was covered in sweat and he could not hide his shocked expression. His voice trembled as he said, "Lu has just lit up the second divine monument." Nearby, those examinees were shocked when they heard this, and they all hurriedly stood up. They looked at the examinee who had sent the message, and all of them asked at the same time. "What? How is this possible? Didn't he just light up the first divine monument? How could he light up the second one right away?" The examinee who was being questioned was speechless. He didn't know how to explain, but that was the truth. Lu quickly lit up the second divine monument, and he didn't lie to them. Instantly, the surroundings became deathly silent. Meanwhile, the faces of Kamiya and the others all revealed joyful expressions. They guessed in their hearts that Lu must have done it on purpose. This fellow always did not play by the rules, however, they still did not completely relax. After all, he had only lit up the divine monuments now. There was still a long way to go before they could reach the required 30 divine monuments. And in front of the second divine monument that Lu was at, everyone was stunned. They only saw Lu walk in and raise his hand to place it on the divine monument. Then, the divine monument was lit up. Lu did not even need to close his eyes. He did not sit cross-legged in front of the divine monument and maintain a high concentration to communicate with the divine monument. Just like that, the divine monument was easily lit up. They swallowed their saliva crazily and watched in disbelief as Lu left. Very soon, news about Lu kept coming in. Lu lit up the third divine monument. Lu lit up the fourth divine monument. Lu lit up the fifth divine monument. The speed at which Lu lit up the divine monuments was like a spark landing in the dry grass. In an instant, a huge fire was ignited. Lu did not stop until he reached a divine monument. He touched it with his hand and the divine monument lit up automatically. It was because these people had never seen a light before. Otherwise, they would have thought that Lu had a switch in his hand. Those divine monuments were like light bulbs. As long as he pressed the switch, these divine monuments would be lit up. In their eyes, Lu lighting up these divine monuments was as easy as drinking water and eating food. There was no difficulty at all. At this moment, everyone was guessing whether Lu would be the next Soros. Soros had also lit up 100 divine monuments in one go. But it didn't seem like he was as fast as Lu. At least Soros needed to stand in front of the divine monuments for a while and use his spiritual power to communicate with the divine monuments to light up the divine monuments. Soros only lit up the divine monuments the moment the sun set. But Lu had already lit up more than 10 divine monuments. Only 20 minutes had passed, and most of this time was still spent on the road. Could it be that Lu could really create a miracle? Everyone could not help but think of a miracle. Very quickly, Lu arrived at the 20th divine monument. There were no examinees here, but there were 2 people standing in front of the divine monument. These 2 people were the divine monument slaves. Lu did not say anything, he just cupped his hands towards them. Then, he walked forward. Just like before, he began to light up the divine monument. It didn't take more than 10 seconds. The moment Lu placed his hand on the divine monument, the divine monument lit up automatically. This scene shocked the 2 divine monument slaves. They hadn't changed their expressions for decades, and this was the first time their emotions had changed. They revealed a shocked expression. Such a terrifying speed to light up the divine monument. The other slave also sighed. He should be the fastest in the past few decades. He's even faster than Ike and Soros. After a moment of silence, the divine monument slave sighed. It's not that he's faster, it's that he's much faster. He's frighteningly fast. Although Soros can only light up 100 divine monuments a day, he has stayed in front of these divine monuments and communicated with them before. He has a certain level of understanding towards these divine monuments.